Welcome to the New Discovery Christian Podcast, where you'll find Bible messaging and sermons that will encourage, uplift, and challenge you to a godlier life. Join our community and become inspired to continue living a God-directed life.
Welcome again to the New Discovery Podcast. Here I am, Kyle, as your host, not co-host today. I got my co-host, Parker McKinley, today. We started off with a little laughter today. So, yeah.
Over the most serious topic ever.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, yeah. So, on that laughter, so we're getting it out of our system right now.
Happy Halloween.
Yeah. So happy Halloween, because we're going to be going over the problem of evil part 2 today. So yeah, we're going to dive into that. A lot of evil going on. So we went over this topic not long ago in our last podcast series. And so to hash kind of what we went over last time, even if you ended up watching it, and if you didn't, I'd recommend going back and watching that episode to get the context of this one, because I think it'll help a little bit. But what we went over last time was the origin of evil, especially within Scripture. Where does it come from? Where does it manifest itself? And so we went from there, a lot of Genesis we were talking about. And then specifically, what is the nature of evil? Like, what actually is it? So we went over that. What is actually evil? And we kind of touched on a little bit of hope last time. So this time we're going to jump in. There's a few more things we want to kind of extrapolate out a little bit and talk about with when it comes to evil, because we didn't really talk about a few different topics. And the first one is like how do we even see evil? So it's one thing to talk about what the nature of evil is. That's one thing. But like, how do we see it in the world? How can we identify it in different things and in this world? So I think that's an important thing too, and that has to do with kind of the origin of evil. Has to do with the curse in the beginning. So then what does that look like in the actual world? And so, I put a couple different things that we can talk about, and people, behaviors, communication, people's thinking, circumstances, nature, space, time. So there's a lot going on there in those different topics. But I mean, one that I want to jump into probably is, people, I think it's very easy for us to jump into. How do you see evil in people? I think we can very easily talk about that, very easily talk about stories that we've had or circumstances we've seen or we know that have happened. And one thing that I guess to start it off, when you can see in people, and it somewhat has to do with what the nature of evil is a bit, but is a circumstance that someone brought up one time that was for sure evil. Was someone talked about how in the Nazi concentration camps, one thing that they would do is, first of all, they carted these people off in these in the trains, and obviously, they took them off. Most people didn't even survive the train rides, especially the weak, the old, and the young. Usually, a lot of them would die off before they even got to the concentration camps. And obviously that's really bad. And then what happens in the concentration camps and how they were treated. But one person put up a sign in the front of the concentration camps, and it said, work will free you. And someone deliberately put that sign up, work will free you, to mess with the people that came in there, because they're not free, and they're not working, because we usually think of work as in achieving meaning and purpose in our life, and there they are in the front of a concentration camp putting work frees you in the front of it, as in like a slap in the face. So who thought of that? Like, what went through someone's mind to be like, let's put that in the front right there, just to shame them as they come in,
to give them hope,
like
thinking that they would get out,
kind of like a false hope. Yeah. And just like a reminder as well that this is not going to free you, this type of work. Someone was insidiously thinking, let's put that in the front there, just to make them feel bad, essentially, just to put them down. Because this isn't going to free anyone what's going to happen in these concentration camps. And one thing that also happened as well in these concentration camps is, so some people would think, okay, well, they're going to do work, like they're going to do like what some prisoners do. They're going to chop wood. They're going to, break up stones and things like that. And that's at least going to help the government, right? Like at least somewhat, things like that in building projects, which they did some of those things, and someone can somewhat twist and manipulate and say that's a good thing for them and that's freeing. You have to do a lot of twisting to get there. But here's one thing that someone thought about. This is not standard protocol in the Auschwitz or any of the concentration camps. Someone thought this up and just wanted to do this. Is what they would do is they would have 100-pound bags and they would fill them up full of rocks. And what they would do is, so this would be at the front of the concentration camp, and what they would tell them is, we want you to move. And by the way, this concentration camps, for context, are like mini cities. Like there's hundreds of thousands of people in these concentration camps. Like it's like going to the other side of Hernando and back. Like it's not like, oh, we're just going to walk for like a quarter of a mile. It's like, no, you're going to walk for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles to get to the end of this. It's literally a city. And so what they would say is, pick up this 100-pound bag. And I don't know if you guys ever picked up a 100-pound bag. I've picked up a 100-pound dummy, and it's heavy. Like it's not, I exercise and I like lift weights, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, you really need to squat down and make sure you get this on right. And it's like super, it's easy. It's awkward. It's very heavy. And so the first thing they do is they end up telling them, pick up this bag. I want you to drag it across the entire concentration camp. So someone may think, oh, okay, well, they're just, pulling a bag somewhere else because they need it there or something. There's a purpose behind this. There's a reason behind this. And it's like, they're like, no, we want you to drag it across the other end of the concentration camp, and we want you to drag it all the way back again. So, and it's like, why are they doing that? And this isn't standard protocol in the concentration camps. Who cooked up in their mind that they found that they got something out of watching people drag 100-pound bags to the other side of the compound and back?
And not healthy people either, because they weren't well taken care of. They weren't like strong, fit individuals.
Right.
They were mistreated and abused and really I'm sickly and stuff because of a lot of the, they just weren't taken care of, obviously.
Right, they could be starving to death. They're going to tell a kid to do the same thing, and he may not weigh that much. So you may have a 9-year-old woman who's already starving to death on, her deathbed, and she's going to go do that too. So not just think, oh, the strongest and the fittest person there is going to be the only person doing this. Like everyone's doing this. And then I think the most insidious thing though is, why did someone want someone to do that? Because it's not like clear of why did they have them do that? What went through someone's mind that were like, I want to watch someone drag this bag from the other side of an entire city that's 100 pounds and back. No purpose, no reason behind it. I just want to watch them suffer. And I think in that, someone cooked that up. There's something really insidious and evil about that. I'm going to cook up in my own mind something that's going to make you suffer. Because some people just go along and do evil because other people are kind of just going along. I'm going to go along to get along kind of thing. And that's one thing. I'm not saying it's not evil, but there's something, and again, when I mentioned that's not protocol, who cooked that up and wanted to see people suffer like that? Just to add on to it, and had no purpose.
That was just in one, or
that was one instance in the concentration camps.
That wasn't procedure to do that.
No, someone in the concentration camps, one of the guards, wanted to do that, to watch other people suffer specifically.
I think you have to also think that the guards, for instance, that you're referring to, in these concentration camps, and the people that were put to work to do this to, the Jewish people, they weren't good people weren't doing that. There weren't Like, you couldn't have a good moral compass and a good heart and be able to do that. I really don't think so. Like, to put your, I don't know, does that make sense? Like, I couldn't see, like, good moral people saying, like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Like, I'll go to these concentration camps. And obviously I don't know what the world was like back then. I wasn't there. You know, if you had to do it to provide for, say, your family or something, or you didn't have a choice to be one of those guards. But, like, if you signed up for that, to do that to other people, then there's already something that's off to me about what type of person.
That almost enters into the and I think there's two different studies that talk about this, and they're pretty they're not easy to gulp down. Like there's a book called let me see if I can name it right now. We'll link it down below though. I'm just trying to think. It's like something like Everyday Men. I think I'm getting that right. And this story outlines before Nazi Germany. These guys are police officers in Germany before the Nazis take over. So they're already police officers. You know, the Nazis aren't over, and then it flips over to the Nazis. So they were police officers not under Germany, and now they're Gestapo, which is the Nazi police now. Mm-hmm. And so the story journeys these young guys. I mean, they're in their 20s, and so they turn out from normal, just everyday guys, just trying to make a living for their family, have a job, you know, do their thing in life, you know, go to church and all this stuff. And so the story begins like that, just normal guys, and then at the end of the story, as you read this progressively, they find themselves in Poland, taking naked pregnant women and shooting them and throwing them into ditches. And so you journey throughout this book how they went from just normal guys to this. And there's no other way to say it, but that's it becomes, could you be those guys? Could you be those people who did that? And I think what it show, and there's another study, so when you put this along with it, it's called the Milgram experiment. I believe I'm saying that one right. And so this was a study done in the 50s, 60s area, and they wanted to find out, like, how could people do things like what I'm talking about? Do most people willing to do that? Some people, minority? They were trying to figure that out in a test scenario. And so here's what they did in the Milgram experiment. So they set it up to where there is a doctor, and so he's the authority figure in the situation, the professional that you're supposed to look to. And then there's this console that's supposed to be in front of you, and it has different levels of, like, shock, but it's not for you, though. So there's supposed to be another person in the other room that's supposed to be receiving the shock. So the way it goes is the professional's in there with you. There's questions for the other person in the other room. You never see them. You can hear them, though. You have audio, so you can hear the person in the other room, but you can't see them. And so the person who's doing this doesn't know that the other person's an actor. So the other person's an actor. They're what's about to happen isn't really real, but the person sitting there doesn't know that. Can't do this experiment anymore because it's technically unethical, but the results are important, though. And so what happens is there's a question to the person on the other side. The person who's doing the experiment, say it's you have to ask them that question, and if they get it right, they don't get a shock. If they get it wrong, they get a shock. So the shock progressively gets worse and worse and worse as they get more wrong throughout the list. And so at the end of the list, it says something like warning, like danger, like dangerous electricity shock at the end. So as it progressively gets worse. So you see that. And so the questions go out, and, you know, they're asking them questions. So
one of the
first
get harder.
I think they're always just kind of like a little bit hard, I think. I can't remember the questions, if I'm honest, because there's a video of it that I had watched in one of my psychology classes about the Milgram, and I read about it too. I just can't remember the questions, though. But the actors deliberately sometimes getting them wrong because it's all an acting thing. So they're not really getting it wrong because they want to get shocked. So in this experiment, they want to see how far this person goes. because the experiment is how far will this person go till they say no more. Like, I'm not going to shock the person anymore. They want to find out how far they'll go with this. And so, you know, they keep going. They're asking their questions. The first one's kind of like a little baby shock, and they're kind of like, you know, oh, then, you know, I felt that, you know, it's like no big deal. And they keep going, and then, you know, you hear the actor, and they're like, ooh, you know, that one kind of hurt. And as they keep going, it's like, and then at one point they're like, oh, like that hurt. That hurt. And, you know, sometimes the person will think about it, or what the person sitting here keeps doing is, as it gets worse and worse, they keep looking to the doctor person for like a response. And they're like, how are they responding when this is happening? And the doctor is always calm, always collected, never acting like anything bad is happening. So they see that, and sometimes the doctor won't even look back. He's just looking at his notes, and they'll just, okay, let's just, you know, keep going. And so they keep going, and then eventually the person's like, oh my gosh, like that really hurt. And, you know, they're like turning back. They're like, did you hear that? And the doctor be like, yeah, I heard that. Just keep going. Like, they agreed to this. You agreed to this. Just, you know, keep going. And by the way, this person, like, it's you, imagine. Like, you can leave at any time. Like, they even tell you this. Like, you can leave. No one's forcing you to do this experiment. And so they say that, you know, you can technically leave. But they always emphasize, just keep going with it. Like, why would you leave? You know, you already agreed to this, so keep going. And they say the other person agreed to this. And then so it starts to get to an area where the critical point is where it goes from, ow, that hurts. And they're kind of like, I don't want to do this anymore. And to, here's the real point, is where there's another shock, and they're like, oh my gosh, that really hurt. They're like, I have heart problems. My heart doesn't feel right. So that's the critical moment for the person sitting here. And they always are kind of like, did you hear what they said? Like, they said they have heart issues. Like this may not go well for them. Like, they said their heart is hurting right now. And so almost everyone, the doctor's like, just keep doing the experiment. It's going to be okay. They agreed to this. Just keep going. And so this is harming someone at this point in their mindset. Like, someone is being hurt. Someone's being hurt in this experiment. But they're just like, they look to them, the doctor's reassuring, and they keep going. And so, again, it gets worse and worse. And this person's like, my heart isn't beating right. Like, stop doing this. Like, why are you doing this? Like, it's like, really to a point, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, as you're watching this, at least you're not in the experiment technically, but you're like, whoa, you know, the person's like, my heart isn't beating right. It's like, stop doing this. Why would you do this? A majority of people keep going. And the last one is kind of the worst one. After the last one, or there's like 3 more shocks, and you don't hear the person anymore. Like, it shocks them. You don't hear a response from the actor anymore. It's like they're dead. And most people, almost everyone shocks them continuously after that, as if like the person is dead, and with no response from the person any longer. And it's like 9 out of 10 people will go all the way to the end. It's only like 1 out of 10 people are going to get up and leave the experiment. And there was only one person who got up and left out of this experiment, because they did it multiple times. So there's only like one person who ever gets up. Sometimes it's 10 out of 10 of people. So they even interviewed him, and they're like, what made you even get up? And he's like, well, you know, again, this is 1 out of 10. I didn't care what the professional ever had to say anything. He's like, I just clearly knew that I needed to get up because this person is being harmed by this. And so the experiment was trying to think, oh, well, most people are going to do that. They're just going to get up when someone's being hurt or the pain is coming in and someone's suffering. But that's not true. They found a separate conclusion, is that, and they were doing this to figure out, would most people be a Nazi? And so they're, even with that one guy, he said, you know, if this was in society, he said, I may have got up and left here, but I don't know for sure I would always do this. So even he said that. And so the experiment comes to the conclusion of, more than likely, most people are going to be a Nazi, essentially. Most people aren't going to get up, and they're not going to stand up and put themselves at risk when it comes to, because with this, it's not like you're going to die and be shot out back. It's just that doctor is socially not going to be along with you, and you may get some repercussions, you know, just socially, verbally from him. Like, you're not going to be out back being shot. So when you see that experiment, you're like, well, what if you were taken out back and shot? It's like this experiment already shows at least 9 out of 10 aren't going to do it. And it's, men, women, different backgrounds, everyone in this experiment. And they redid the experiment again in the 2000s, and it was the same conclusion again when they redid it, like 50, 60 years ago. So I guess that's the question too, is and that's kind of separate when it comes to, in a way, when we were talking about the dragging the bags, like someone cooked that up in their mind. With this one, it's like, will people go along with evil when it's the social norm? And what this conclusion is, most people are going to go along with social evil because we're going to go along to get along. We're not going to ruffle anyone's feathers, essentially, that's kind of hard, because then it comes to the conclusion, there's a better chance that you would have been a Nazi than not a Nazi in Nazi Germany. And it's like, you really got to ask yourself that question then when it comes to people and evil. It's like, is there evil? Well, yeah. And can you manifest it and do it? It's like, yeah, the full capabilities are there for you to do that. So it's the problem is very big. Maybe that's a better a way of putting it, I guess. But yeah, I think those are two different avenues right there, is manifesting and cooking up evil in your head. And then there's a social evil involved in there as well, which, we can think about that even within our own culture as well, is, people, we have thoughts that go on in our head and cook things up, but also socially, it's like, do you go along with those things? And more than likely you're going to a certain extent. So yeah, is there anything you guys can think of when it comes to what those things are? I was trying to lay a foundation here of kind of the discussion.
Yeah, I think the Bible says that our hearts are exceedingly wicked, and I think that's what we're looking at. I don't think we're as good as we think we are. I was listening to a guy, I forget his name. It's on YouTube. But he does a lot. He writes books on the problem of evil. And he did a lot of study on genocide, and I think we may have had this conversation before, but he pointed out that every culture justifies their own genocide. So when he was talking to a lady at one of wherever he was speaking at, he brought up the genocide of the Jewish people. There's a few others he brought up, and he brought up abortion as well. And then the lady, came up to him and was like, well, I don't think you should talk about abortion because that kind of weakens your case. He's like, well, why is that? It's like, well, because abortion's not really genocide. It's just, they're not really fully human yet. Is kind of her point, which is exactly what Nazi Germany said. They're not the fittest race, so we can just kill them off. Or think about slavery, like why can you enslave millions of people? It's because they're not really human. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's the same song, second verse, and I think that kind of shows it, how bad we really are and how in need of, salvation or how bad we need salvation as well.
Yeah. One thing, I don't know about you guys, but one thing that comes to mind immediately when it comes to this discussion is, I think abortion immediately comes to my mind, and like you were saying, every culture justifies this. Like you can just go back to Israel, for instance. Did they slaughter their own children? Yeah, they did it to the altar of Molech and burned them to death. You may say, how did they justify something like that? Well, you have to know the context, because you have to understand there's a context that's justifying it today. And so their context was if you think about it, you think, oh, well, even today we sacrifice certain things for the future. So that's the basic concept of a sacrifice. Let go of something now that's valuable to you to gain favor in the future. Go to college for a while, you don't make a lot of money, so you can gain a future prospect for yourself in the future. That's a type of sacrifice. So you have to understand that mindset of sacrifice. And I'm going to let my child go to be killed so we may get good harvests and get wealth and prosperity. And that's their mindset. And it's like, so we can stave off things like plague and famine. It's like, you let this one go to save the rest. There's your justification right there. So, and you go against it. It's like, well, don't you love everyone? Like, hello, do you want everyone else to die? Like, who are you? Who are you to sit there and justify that we can't let this one child go? It's like that one child and many more children and other people will die. Like, how dare you tell us we can't do this and sacrifice this one child off? It's like, that's just what you do. Are you going to be the one who stands up to them? Or are you going to be like, well, that makes sense to me. That's self-justified. So there's your child sacrifice back then. And then today it's, how dare you tell a woman what she can't do with her body? Like, who do you think you are to do that? That child would probably be raised in a worse home. Like, we need less children. Like, we need to depopulate this earth. Like, who are you to say we can't do that? Like, the earth is already overpopulated. You want more children to die, more people to die? Like, who do you think you are? What about their freedoms? Is that even really a child? Like, and you're going to make a big deal out of all this? What if there was incest? What if there was rape? Like, who do you think you are with your discussion? And there's your justification again for killing children. It all sounds good on the surface. It's like, oh, it may sound isolated by itself, sounds really good. But when you put it all together, it's like, is that a good argument though for still doing evil? But that's what every culture does that though. The ribbon and the wrapping paper may be different, but it's the same present. It's still a present. It may just be wrapped differently, but it's the same thing. So every culture does this because evil is in our hearts. So it's
right.
It's not going anywhere. Every heart's corrupted.
Yeah, and we always like to pass the blame too. It's like, well, it's legal, so it's fine. Because think about Nazi Germany. What did they say when we, came in there? It's like, well, we were just following orders.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, just pass it along. Even though we know that they had a higher standard to follow, and they knew it too.
Yeah.
And
that's why someone once said, I forgot who it was, but they said that the court cases when it comes to the Germans afterward were one of the pinnacles of the 20th and 21st century, because we finally sat down together as a world and said there's certain things that are inherently evil and everyone knows it, and no matter, you can't make any excuses for it with I was following orders. You inherently know that these things are evil when you're doing them, so you can't say, well, I was just following orders. That's not good enough. And you will be condemned for this. It will be criminalized. So in those court cases, the first time in history we ever did that, where we all conclude together as humans that these are wrong things to do. That's never been done before. And that's the first time that happened. And it's like, no, you can't just sit there and say you're following orders. That's not good enough. Because other armies in the past, they did horrible things as well. When a city was out and got raided back then, you live in the Romans or antiquity. You expect that most of the men were going to be slaughtered and killed. The women were going to be raped. They were going to be taken off into slavery afterwards, and then so were the children. It's like that was the normal thing back then to expect. If your city fell, it's like that's what's about to happen to you. That's not, and it could even be worse than that. That's probably like the standard default back then. So. But no one said certain things were wrong to do back then. This is the first time where it's like, you do these things, it's clearly wrong. So they finally there was a clear definition by all people, what is evil? Because that's always been a speculation back then. Some people are like, evil and good doesn't exist. It's like, but we sat down together and were like, no, this is clearly wrong. And most people go along with that. They look at that and they're like, okay, that's at least evil. There's some people today where if they're really hardcore, they'll look at it and be like, oh, I don't know if that was actually evil. It sounds bad that I say that, but I can't clearly say that.
I had that conversation on Facebook one time. A lady said she didn't believe in good and evil. So I asked her, okay, is torturing babies for fun, is that evil? Mm-hmm. Or is it just a matter of opinion, or is it actually evil for everybody? And she bit the bullet. She's like, well, I don't like it, but that's technically just an opinion. Mm. Okay, now keep in mind the very next post I saw her make was she was condemning somebody else for being evil or doing something wrong. So I've met people that deny there's good and evil. Never met anybody that actually lives that way. Because we know it. We can't deny it. We can deny it with our words, but we know inside our hearts that things are really right and wrong.
Yeah, the actions matter. Do you act like there's evil? Do you act like there's good? And so, like you said, your argument falls apart if you act like those things are real rather than those are opinions of other people. Because when you treat people with opinions, you act a lot differently towards people. If it's clearly evil and good you're dealing with, you treat people in a completely different way than just pure opinions and speculation.
Right. Like, do we lock people up for liking ice cream?
I think that's a pretty good rap when it comes to people and the different ways that it happens. I mean, people cook up evil ideas in their heads. I mean, abortion can be extended out to many different areas when it comes to
and you can choose any topic. Like, it's
you go into sexuality. I mean, everyone thinks the gay and LGBT thing is so new. It's like we're so new. We came up with this, and then you go back to ancient Greece and like that was a thing. Like there's even a name in the word Greek for an older man to be with a young boy. Like that's not even something we've gotten to yet, but that was justified back then. It was like, yeah, it's a normal thing. Get yourself a young slave boy, and like that's what he's there for. And then that's okay. You know, no one's gonna do anything. Now people today are like, oh my gosh, that's so messed up. It's like, yeah, but then those cultures would say certain things that we're doing sexually are messed up. No. And give it time right now, the way things are going in our culture. I mean, it'll just open up more and more when it comes to, because we have no argument against certain things. So it's like, it's just my choice. So then what if people choose evil? You have no argument to speak against that evil because it's someone's just free choice. So who are you to say anything? Right. That's the argument that we have today. So there is no cap to how far this can go. And so again, all these things can become legitimate. Like I saw a TEDx not long ago, and they show these things in colleges, not like some backdoor, video or something like that. Some weird dude on YouTube in his mom's basement. It's far from that. I mean, TEDx have millions upon hundreds of millions of people watch this. And I've watched it many times in college.
What is that?
A TEDx. It's like they'll have certain topics. They'll have like an expert come on there and they'll talk about this topic, and everyone kind of like comes in to watch them essentially. And so it's a big thing, especially in colleges, to shoot this out and people want to watch them. And they're on YouTube as well. I mean, again, millions of people watch this. And so they had a woman come on there, and she was sitting there talking about how we no longer need to condemn pedophiles immediately. She was essentially like, we need to listen to them, hear what they have to say and their perspective of things. We don't need to criminalize them. And so some people may think, well, okay, Kyle, you're being a little harsh here. I mean, are we talking like late teens or something? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking like we're talking infants. Like, I'm just going to say it straight up. Like, she is justifying that. She specifically brings it up in that age group. Like, we don't need to condemn someone who's trying to have sexual relations with an infant. Because who are you to say anything against that person? We need to speak to them. And you know what? She talks about it on and on and on. There's a couple guys on YouTube who like come out and say like they are pedophiles, like in this area of like infants. And like she shows them and says, yeah, who are you to judge this person? And you know what? Some people will be like, you know what? I bet she's just a loon. No one's going to listen to her. She has a rounding of applause as she gets off that stage from people in the universities. So what does that say exactly? Because there's no argument against it. It's whatever you think or whatever you like, it's okay. And so, again, these things, when you don't take a stand, these things will just be allowed to just manifest into the culture. Just what everyone thinks. So, I mean, it's a scary thing. Did you have something, Parker?
Well, you said that she was applauded. If I can, real quick, this is the end of Romans 1. Of course, Paul's he's just letting them have it on kind of their lifestyle and stuff. But he says, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who, knowing the righteous judgment of God, and there's kind of where you're talking about applauding, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. So, yeah, this is not a new thing, and Scripture speaks to it plainly. But I think this was kind of the point that I brought up, and I forgot, like, because I know we talked about the last podcast about what is evil, and it's just a rejection of God, and that's what we're doing in society. Like, we have completely abandoned Him, and that's what it says right here in Romans 1, and that's kind of the lead up to it.
And that's the round of applause that they get. And if you apply the Milgram experiment further, we could sit there and say just what the Nazis did and just reduce it to that. Well, the real expansion of that is these things that we're talking about right now. Do most people stand up against these things? Well, how do they get through? Most people, do they agree with it? Probably not. But they're doing what they did in the experiment. They're looking behind them and how are they acting? And I'm going to act like that person. They're cool and calm about it. So why am I making a big fuss out of this? Right. So on a big, large scale, that's what people are doing, is they're looking, well, how did someone else think about abortion? Let me see what they have to say. So, and as more of those people that are sitting back there are not Christian, mature Christians, and as the faith is eroded, who are you then looking to?
Yeah.
Because you're going to look to someone. That's the true fact. You're going to look to someone. Is it a good person? Is it a Christian? Do they have Christian foundations? Can you trust what authority that they're coming from with this? Or is it someone you can't trust? Their morals are all over the place. Well, that means when you're looking to them, how you make those choices are going to be all over the place. And that's what we see in our culture today. So I think that's something as a Christian, that's something we can do is, who are you looking to? Who is the person you're looking to? Because you're going to look to someone. It's just that experiment clearly shows that. You're going to look to someone, and kids do the same thing for context. They've done experiments with children. And if you have kids, you probably know this as well, is when a kid does something, something dramatic happens, what do? They look to their parents. How does the parent react? And however the parent reacts is going to instill how the kid reacts to that situation. If mom or dad flips out over this certain situation, the kid's going to learn I flip out over this situation. If mom and dad is calm, cool, collected, they're going to be calm, cool, and collected. They're going to look to the parent because the parent is the one who keeps them safe. The parents are almost like everything to them. You can't lose the parent. So we do the same thing. And I guess the question is, you can bring it out even further. Are you looking to your Father in heaven? Or are you looking to someone on earth, essentially? Are you looking how God reacts to these situations when something happens? Or are you looking to Joe down, Joe down on the corner, or the guy on YouTube? Or are you looking to how your friends act next to you in these situations? Are you looking at how that politician is acting? Or are you looking how God is reacting, and God's people specifically as well? Or are you just looking all over the place? And so then you're going to be all over the place. And so I think that's the question of what you can do, I think. Man, I thought we were going to go even further in this list, but we already hit 40 minutes already. Yeah. So, Kinley, is there anything you wanted to say? Because we may end up wrapping it up here in a minute. Is there any kind of exfoliation of what we said or comments? Okay. Just making sure. What about you, Parker? Is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I think you summed it up nicely.
Okay, cool. I don't know if we're going to do a part 3 because we only got halfway through that. So, which is good though. So, thank you for joining in again on the podcast about evil again. I don't know if we're going to have a part 3. We certainly can. So I guess this is like a Halloween special. I don't know if that deliberately happened, but I guess it did happen though. So you won't watch it on Halloween though. It'll be in November, but we're on Halloween today, so that's all that matters, I guess. So thanks for joining in. If you like these podcasts, again, the likes matter, the subscribing matters, and the bell button matters when it comes to getting these up to date when they come out. And the likes just remind us, we're on the right track, and it gets it out to the people who need to get it as well. So again, thank you, and we'll jump in again on the next podcast. See ya.